So we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to share a screen here and kind of let you guys know what we're going through, how we're going to go, kind of preview the meeting uh, first. So do that. Okay, so we'll take a look at the legislative calendar, how many bills we're reviewing, and then we're going to focus on SB 79 and SB 607 today, which are the two worst bills so far in our opinion. We'll talk about, I'll outline SB 79, what it does, but then Maria and Tom and Stu are all going to kick in on SB 79, and particularly Maria will help us see what we can do, because they're quite a bit ahead of us on that. We'll have some thoughts on it, any amendments if we can't kill it, any actions we can take, and then Stu's is gonna lead a discussion of CEQA, SB 607, and we can get some updates from people across the group as we want. So with that, any questions on that? I'm not watching hands, so just speak up if you. All right, so let's just start with the brief status of where we are here. Upcoming on the calendar, there's going to be a spring recess. May 2nd is the last day for policy committees to hear and report fiscal bills, or report, and May 9th is the last day for policy committees to hear and report out non-fiscal bills. And then May 23rd is the last day for appropriations, essentially the fiscal committees, to report bills out. And then the first house, or each side will essentially have their floor sessions June 2nd to June 6th, and that will tell us what bills have made it to the second house, and what bills haven't. So there's been a total of 2,593 bills introduced this session. We've got 126 that we're reviewing. We're really only going to be able to take significant action on a handful or two of those, but we got to screen them all to find the ones that really need attention. And today those are SB 79 and SB 607. 79 is upzoning around transit stops. It defines 3 tiers of transit and upzones height, density, and concessions specified around those tiers. There's 5, I think. Now it's, I guess, 6 upzoning levels, depending on how close you are to one of those tiers. Includes, 75-foot upzoning plus 3 concessions, 65 and around at a different areas, another 65 depending on where you are, a 55 and a 45 plus density bonus. And then on top of all of that, if the property is adjacent to any of the tier transit stops, 20 feet additional height intensifier. So that's kind of like the crux of the upzoning issues. And with that, let me turn it over to Maria Kalban to tell us what they see in it and what they've done.
Thanks, Rick. It's kind of nice to see everybody. There's so many familiar faces here. Shortly, United Neighbors had a statewide network several years ago when we fought SB 9. But we had focused our attention in the last few years on LA because LA was repairing a housing element. So we've been working with the city of LA to try and get a housing element passed that did not densify single family neighborhoods. The original draft of that housing element had huge overlays that allowed apartments in single family. So we mobilized every community that was impacted and worked with them to draw maps showing how much housing could be added in these communities on commercial and transit corridors that were areas not identified by the planning department that would create enough capacity to meet state housing mandates without the need to densify existing neighborhoods. And so we presented 189 pages of maps to the mayor's office and senior executives at the planning department and our council members. And through all our team efforts, we were able to get LA's housing element to exempt single family. And we got it through the finish line with assurances from the state that the housing element appeared in good standing. So understand, our housing element adds a lot of density, but it also respects single family, open space, and historic districts. We had a lot of fights from a lot of groups, but we were able to build enough rapport with the city planning department, the mayor's office, that we were not considered NIMBYs by the city, but as a coalition interested in solutions. So it came as no surprise to us when we saw Scott Wiener introduce SB 79. This is a bill that undermines all our efforts with the housing element, because even if you're in compliance with a housing element that has all kinds of demands, this bill blows it apart. So we are organized and ready to fight with our communities because we are already set up to fight for these things. So our first step was to analyze the bill, and we talked to legislative directors and communicated with Scott Wiener himself. So we felt pretty confident that we understood SB 79. And Rick, you totally have a great outline on this. The first half of the bill is about using surplus land, and it's not the part of the bill we're concerned about. It's the last half of the bill that we need to pay attention to. It's a transit bill that allows that 6 to 7 story apartments anywhere within a half-mile radius from a light rail stop or a bus stop if some part of that bus route has a dedicated bus lane. And it's been pointed out by our planning director that you can just paint bus lane on a lane, and that automatically gives this bill all kinds of concessions for, to upzone our areas. So this impacts not just single family, but in our area, light industrial, which for LA is important for future job growth, and affects historic districts that are often our most vulnerable for gentrification. And this bill does it even though we have shown plenty of capacity on our existing transit corridors. So because we realize the importance of visually understanding the impact of these bills, we have drawn up maps and circulated it to our local contacts to make sure people fully understand the impact. The bill does not mandate affordable units. These developments can be market rate, which could undermine a city's attempt to incentivize development of affordable units, which could impact the city's ability to meet the RHNA mandate at all levels of affordability. And also, most cities have spent millions of dollars and hundreds of man hours getting their housing element ready for state approval, and this literally ignores those efforts. So our campaign is to amend SB 9 to exclude single-family, light industrial, and historic districts. We feel that density belongs on the transit corridor. We started our campaign by educating everyone about the bill. We annotated it and gave bullet points and distributed it throughout our network. At the same time, our board had meetings with the mayor's office, planning department, the mayor's legislative director in Sacramento, our senators, our city attorney, our county supervisors, to make sure everyone was aware of this bill. And you would be surprised how many people are not aware of it yet. When we then began our outreach, our campaign formally started this week with a click and send letter to the mayor, council members, and state senators. This email went to our neighborhood association leaders, and they distributed to their contacts. The letter was set up so it could be personalized, edited, or sent as is, and we have generated so far hundreds of emails with alerts, which alert our city leaders. So this is important because for LA to take a position on a state bill, a member of the city council must introduce a resolution that must be seconded by another council member and passed by a majority vote. And we have spent a great deal of time with council members, and we have good feelings that we will have a resolution presented soon. We keep every one of our community teams engaged with progress reports, and next week we begin a campaign focused on Sacramento. We will do a letter campaign to the committees hearing the bill, to state senators, and post to the legislative portal. We hope that we'll be able to again link up with our San Diego contacts, our Santa Monica contacts, San Francisco contacts, and any other affected community, because this will take a statewide full court press. So we would like to show you briefly some of our visuals so you could see what we've been circulating, because you'll not believe what the effects are until you see them. So Jeff, it's your game here.
Okay, if I can share the screen, and I can. Okay, we're going to start and show you a map of the San Fernando Valley and just start to get a sense of the impact. We don't know all the areas, but this is just the Metro's map of the San Fernando Valley showing bus routes, guided bus routes, and light rail. Okay? And if you take and put SB 79 on it, you get this. Now, we don't know all the routes in the valley because we don't know every community. But this is just some, and these are half-mile circles, right? And half-mile lines. And so when you start here on Ventura Boulevard, in one part of Ventura Boulevard, there is that dedicated bus lane. So everything on this bus route comes all the way up here through several different communities. That half-mile circle is impacted. And Sepulveda again, and this is light rail, and this is the orange line is here. So all of these areas are impacted. And you have to realize this is a half-mile. So what does it really mean? Let us show you a little closer. This is a map of Sherman Oaks. Okay, and so in Sherman Oaks, we just highlighted our community. Everything else is grayed out. And this is Ventura Boulevard. This is Sepulveda Boulevard. Anybody who knows the area, this is a 405 freeway. Okay, so this is Sherman Oaks. And just on 2 bus lines, this is the impact on the community. This is just 2 bus lines. A bus line that goes on Ventura Boulevard, a bus line that comes from Sepulveda. Again, these are where you have dedicated bus lines. It's just a couple of blocks here, all of Sepulveda, and it goes down Magnolia. There's no dedicated bus lanes on Magnolia, but the bus has passed through dedicated bus lanes. So there's a half-mile radius. Go ahead, Maria.
Right. So if you look at this for Sherman Oaks and many communities around there, this is every single family neighborhood is gone. If literally a developer wishes to build anywhere within this radius.
So if you look at this one, anything that's not yellowed out is where they can build. So this goes way up into the hills in Sherman Oaks, and it goes into our industrial area. It covers commercial sites, multifamily sites, single-family sites, churches, synagogues, it doesn't matter. Any one of these sites, you can put a 6 to 7 story apartment. Because and everything here is within a half mile of transit, so you have no need to have parking in any of these either. So again, so what does it mean? In Los Angeles, your minimum single-family lot is 5,000 square feet. Okay, and a 5,000 square foot lot, it allows for, in the code in Los Angeles, 2,250 square foot home. That's it. So that's what you're seeing here. These are 5,000 square foot lots, and this is a 2,250 square foot home. But SB 79 will allow 6 stories, and based on a density of 100 units per acre, that's 9 units allowed on this property, and it's allowed to be 15,000 square feet. That's what it looks like.
Could they then add a junior ADU and an ADU?
No, but if you have, this is, as Maria said, this is not affordable housing. If you have any affordable units, you now get density bonus. So you can get another 3 stories here.
Mhm.
And more units, more square footage. Okay, and now a little different way of showing it. This is a block that is south of Ventura Boulevard. It's getting close into the hills, and we fought hard to protect these communities in our housing element, as Maria was saying. But if this SB 79 passes, this is what will be happening. Be by right. No one can review it in planning or anything else. This goes to building and safety and can get built. It can be built anywhere in these, within the radiuses, as Maria showed us. So this is Maria's click and send. This is just as it would appear on your phone, on your computer. It's one linear thing, but so you can read it. We made it so it's a little bit more legible. So as you scroll down, you would hit these things like the letter to the mayor. You click on that, and the letter would pop out. It would be populated. It said, "Dear Mayor Bass," and then you just put your name at the bottom and where you live, and you send it off.
And it puts your email address as a sender, so it doesn't get blocked as a mass mailing. And so there's step 2 here is all our council members.
Step 3 is senators. And as it says, then we'll make sure to sign your name and your neighborhood or your group association when you send it off. And you just click on them, it self-populates, and you send it off. It's wonderful. It takes seconds to do. And this is Maria's letter to the mayor, and I'm just going to stop sharing.
So next week we do a similar one for Sacramento, and that's where we're at. And we hope everybody really starts tuning into SB 79. It's a nightmare.
And we're also looking at 677, which is another Wiener bill that does away with SB 9, and we can talk about that some other time. Today we're just talking.
Yeah, we're going to work with our communities on that bill as well, because that's another one. So, Rick, I think that's it for us.
Thanks, guys. That's wonderful, because we're going to be encouraging, talking later about what people ought to be doing, and you guys have already done it. So, great example for everybody, particularly the mapping, because we're going to be encouraging everybody to try to get their local planning departments to analyze the similar mapping analysis for their cities, so that then they can approach the council members with that information and try to get cities to formally oppose SB 79. It's probably the worst bill since SB 50. And
it's really bad. And Rick, Sherman Oaks geographically is one of the larger communities in LA, certainly in the Valley. And you can see these half-mile radiuses wipe out the whole community.
Yeah,
so you understand how big a half-mile radius is.
Exactly. I mean, that's why the mapping is so important, because people can read the bill and go, Oh, okay, that's just by the
Right,
transit stop. But it's not just by the transit stop, it's whole communities.
right, right.
And my personal view is that because transit can change so easily, as you guys also pointed out, that that buses are a very poor basis for upzoning. You know, anything that gets built under SB 79 is going to last 50 to 100 years. You know, and the bus can change tomorrow.
Right, right.
So
And
let me ask Tom to kick in a little bit about anything he wants to say about bus routes, etc.
Before we leave, Maria and Jeff, can we ask them to tell folks what program or how they set up that contact letter so that people can replicate it in their own communities without suffering?
Well, Barbara, we couldn't really tell you that because it took my daughter, who's a millennial, to take it to that level for us. So
Ah,
I can, those people interested in doing that, if you give me an email, Barbara, I can try to get some instruction on how we can do, you can do that. Apparently, it is not that hard. You just have to, but it is the only way to make people respond. Because if you tell people to send a letter, no one does that. So, to your point, Barbara, it's if anybody does want it, I'll put our email in the chat, and we'll try to see if we can get some instruction on how you can do that.
Great. Also, yes, before we leave on your mapping, did you do it yourselves, or did you have a contractor or somebody do that?
no,
No, we
we
have
did it
Jeff.
ourselves.
We did it ourselves and are willing to do it to our LA area people as long as they let us know what bus lanes, what bus routes have any part of it a dedicated lane. Because it could only be, it doesn't have to be longer than a block's worth of dedication that all of a sudden affects the entire line. So if our community groups tell us what bus lines they have, we'll make the map for them.
Because in Los Angeles, Metro puts out these bus diagrams, but nowhere on the internet can you find where there is a dedicated bus lane.
Right.
And so only community knowledge and community knowledge of where the bus stops are will help you do a radius map like that.
Well, thank you. Tom, do you want to say anything about bus lanes and such?
Be happy to. First of all, let's give the devil his due. And Senator Weiner is very, very good at what he does, and his employers are definitely getting their money's worth. And for whatever reason, he has been very successful. He's been very good at the death of 1,000 slices, introducing so many bills over such an extended period of time that he is slowly building up a huge body of provisions in statute, each of which is very objectionable, and in total, they are just unbelievable. Switching now to transit-oriented development. This, of course, is a good thing, but anybody who believes it is an extremely powerful provision to redirect entire city architecture, urban form, and transportation patterns, I suggest your short-term time frame is on about a half century. Also, it is a mistake to believe that high-rise stack and pack is energy efficient, because it isn't. And it is generally more expensive and smaller units. So some of the people will say, well, it's less costly. Well, it can be. If you have a one-bedroom apartment for two people, that can be less costly than a three-bedroom single-family detached for a couple with two kids. But if you look at the square footage and the utility, it just doesn't work. Okay. Bus itself, the general rule of thumb that is used by planners is that people will walk half a mile to a rail line, but will walk a quarter mile to a bus line. And again, that's just a rule of thumb. And you have to shorten it. It's not a half-mile radius. It is half a mile walking distance. And unless it's exactly 1/2 mile north of a station, if it's anything off at a wedge, at an angle in a typical grid system, the actual distance as the crow flies will be less to be acceptable. The other big problem is it is only going to be considered if people can get to where they need to get. And transit systems only well serve the central business district. That's a long understood truth. So if you got a job downtown, fine. But in Los Angeles, for example, under 5% of the total jobs are downtown. Los Angeles has by far the smallest central business district measured in jobs of any major urbanized area in the world. Nowhere else is anywhere near as distributed. And LA is famous for being the region of 36 downtowns. Everything from Long Beach, Pasadena, Warner Center, Universal City, etc. All of these. And if you're going anywhere, from anywhere to anywhere where those jobs are, doing it by transit will be extremely slow. So people just don't do it. The past bills along this line have focused primarily on eliminating any parking requirements on the developer. Developers hate to build parking. It's expensive and they can't charge much. Why do they do it? Because if they don't include parking, then they can't sell or rent the unit. Same thing with commercial real estate. It's a necessary evil. So if you put that in there and you put things that you cannot include the cost of the parking in the basic rent, then developers love the ability to escape having to build parking, which means one of two things, both of them will happen. One, people will start parking wherever they can, on the street and in places where they are not allowed to. And two, at some point, the city will come in and build the parking, which will lose money, which will be covered by the taxpayer. Now, the other major problem with transit, particularly right now, is that transit is very unsuccessful, both in retaining riders, existing riders, let alone expanding ridership, and it is extremely expensive. I'll just focus on a couple in the Bay Area, Muni and BART. They are losing their shirt. And there are major developments, and not both locally and now in the state, to have in the neighborhood of hundreds of millions to over $1 billion a year in additional transit grants from the state to attempt to not reduce transit. But transit ridership has been going down for years pre-COVID, took a huge drop during COVID, and is only very slowly getting back. Also, transit is not very effective at helping people upgrade their lot in life. And I'll be happy to send references to people who have actually studied this, who will tell you that if you want to help somebody upgrade their income and their housing and their entire lot in life, the best thing to do is to get them a car.
Right.
And the decision makers don't like to hear that. So we have a number of popular assumptions that are the basis for Wiener's bills and those of his like thinkers that are totally unproven and in many cases actually disproven. So we are seeing this faced on being thrown on us again, where we, first of all, will have to fund as taxpayers the construction of these units. And as you know, many of the people on this were very active in defeating in the Bay Area our $20 billion housing bond, which would have required $28 billion in property taxes, which was going to go in a very unspecified way and very wasteful way to encourage building of low income developments. Of course, low income for our purposes could include people that were making in excess of 200,000 a year, though, of course, there are many people in the Bay Area and elsewhere who can't afford housing when they make 200,000 a year. So that's arguable, but that's what we're talking about, low income, depending on the family size. That we will see it again. Once those structures are built, because they still do not pencil out, particularly for low income, and even many market rate, lower market rate housing does not pencil out, they will be asking for taxpayer money to pay for construction. We will then, for the lower income, and that's not exactly on point for today, but it is what we will be facing. For the lower income units, there will be additional taxpayer money required to keep those people in lower income units because they can't afford the rent. And then we will have to increase the other infrastructure, everything from utilities to streets, to transit, to schools, to fire, police, etc., if we are going to extreme densify as been planned. Now, the only good news I will tell you is, frankly, I think even with all of these bills, these units are still going to be built very, very slowly because they just don't make a lot of economic sense. Well, thank you for my rambling. I see some questions. Rick, we want to let the people with their hands up have their say and maybe ask me a question.
Sure. Mary, go ahead.
Hi, good morning. This is really a question for Laura. I'm sorry. Hold on a second. United Neighbors. Maria. I'm in Los Angeles, and about a year ago, maybe you remember this, Mayor Bass issued an executive order to speed up density housing construction. And what she failed to do was to omit that this could be done in single family zoning. So what happened over in the Valley, where Nynthia Raman, one of our council members, they started to build this 8-story apartment building right between 2 single family homes. And that there was a outcry. There was public outcry, and Mayor Bass came back and said, I meant to exclude single family home building. And it caused a great stir between Nynthia Raman, who wanted this large, and between Bob Blumenfeld, also council member in the Valley. So I just wanted you to ask where that stands, number one. And number two, I live in Echo Park, which is really a density nightmare in that right in the street behind me, they have built on the side of 2 former single family homes, 48 units. And across the street, 1 single family home now has a 4-story building. And granted, it's half a block from the bus line on Sunset Boulevard, which I guess then qualifies under SB 10. But it's just madness here, and there's no parking required. And the bus line that runs on Sunset has been big problems in terms of crime. There's a lot of crime here in Echo Park. So any feedback on that, I would really appreciate it, Maria. Thank you.
Actually, quickly, that you're referring to ED1, Executive Directive 1. The building that was going to be done in Sherman Oaks and Nithya Raman's is going forward because the city lost the argument. Any development that was introduced during that executive directive before she amended it to exclude single family had to go through. So Blumenfield, all of those that happened before they stopped it, are going forward. So we ended up working with the mayor's office to try to get guidelines for ED1 to prevent some of these horrible things that are happening with ED1 projects. So they can't do it in single family anymore, but the ones that had gotten in before she had stopped it cannot be stopped.
Could those that are not actively talking or are waiting to talk, please mute? We're still getting some feedback. Thank you very much for that comment. Diana Louise, I believe you're next.
Yeah, I'm the lone fish. I'm way up here in Placer County, Northern California. And the majority of you are down in Southern California. I'm sorry. But
Or in the Bay Area.
yeah, right. Or the Bay Area.
Yeah.
I'm in
so-
Sacramento.
Oh, okay. You're fairly close. I don't know if this is a construct of just Placer County or if there's something I haven't been able to find in HCD or with the state that is saying if ADUs are built and are going to house extreme low, because this is where the shortfall is for Placer County. They have 0 in RENA cycle 6 for extreme low income. But they're saying part of that is because they need to deed restrict, especially any new projects have to be under deed restriction for 55 years. Well, who in their right mind would take a single residence, put an ADU on and put that kind of restriction on the property? It's insanity because we're not going to live that long. That's going to pass to heirs. So apparently they don't think anybody's going to pass anything to heirs. I just wonder if there's anybody in this group that is familiar with that, and is that coming directly from a state, or should I just blame it on Placer County's Board of Supervisors and planning?
Well,
Thank you.
This is a problem with low income units for a long time. And there was a infamous case, and this is, boy, almost 20 years ago, where a low income couple qualified to buy a condo. And they were low income, but because she had not finished her law degree yet, and he was still in his residency. So they were definitely low income and they qualified. And then somebody forgot to put a deed restriction in. So they were able to buy, this low income couple was able to buy a condo unit at a vastly reduced price. I believe it was under 50% of the market rate. And then after they both completed their degrees and residency and moved on, they were able to sell it at a market price. And somebody said, that's not what we meant by low income. So there has been some feedback, both at the county level and at the state level, to say low income doesn't mean the first person who moves in. However, what we haven't seen, at least in my experience, is any kind of dedicated review that this is being complied with. And generally that falls on the county. So that's why it's there. It makes some sense from the point of view, if we're going to build low income, we want it to stay low income for a while because we have this requirement. And for sales, I've seen county provisions that say you can make a profit on this to the extent that the similar market rate units go up. So if you bought at 50% and the market rate units went up 50%, then you can make a 50% profit on what you paid, but you can't make a 200% profit. So I hope that's somewhat helpful. This is what happens when you have competing priorities. And I agree with what you said for an ADU. If you were getting some financial assistance from the city, the county, the state, or otherwise,
They want
and that was a condition, then that would make some sense to me.
they want to offer 150,000 to promote extreme low because they have a big goose egg in that category.
Okay.
And then, but that requires 55 years. Well, I'm not a mathematician, but 55 years and 150,000 for the project is not going to pencil out at the end of 55 years if you're planning on this, the property staying in trust or being passed heirs, right? There should be obviously more conversation about how the devaluation of the dollar is already taken over in the last 4 years. Can you even imagine? We probably won't even have dollars 55 years from now.
Thank you very much for making that point. It's very complex, but you've correctly stated the issue. So we'll come back to that maybe at a later meeting. Christopher, you're up.
Hey, Chris, before you, if you got a question for Tom or that relates to this conversation, go ahead. But I do want, after Stu speaks, I do want to bring you in for ONB.
Sure. Yeah, I just had a couple of quick comments to add to Tom's excellent synopsis. I often, and many of you on this call have heard me say this before, but I often point to Santa Monica as kind of the cautionary tale, because Santa Monica embraced this kind of, density at all costs, transit-oriented development, starting about, what was it, Tom, late 90s under Denny Zane, I think?
At least.
And it's about right, yeah. And so, I always like in these arguments to point to examples that have already happened. And after 25 years of turning downtown Santa Monica into a mini Manhattan, we have about a 10% residential vacancy rate, and it's closer to 12% in multifamily. Now, caveat there is that has changed dramatically over the last couple months because a lot of people from the Palisades who lost their homes are renting in Santa Monica, but that's obviously an outlier. Over the last 10, 15 years, we've had those really, really high vacancy rates. And if you were to drive down through downtown Santa Monica over the last few years and look at all of the new buildings, all of them have big banners offering months of free rent and gym memberships and even cash gift cards just to get warm bodies in the front door to take a look at a unit. And at the same time, the average one-bedroom apartment in Santa Monica rents for about $3,500 a month, which is almost 2.5 times the national average. So if density and transit-oriented development were the solution, Santa Monica would be the most affordable city in Los Angeles County, not one of the least. Second point is, there's also a question of quality of life. Even people who can afford those kinds of rents generally don't want to live in these new buildings because they have no soul, they have no charm. They're built, even though they're very expensive to rent, they're still built relatively cheaply. You have, off the rack fixtures and appliances and so forth. So it's kind of nice to look at a first glance, but when you really look under the hood, they're just really not very nice places to live. So why would you spend, $5,000 a month for a 2-bedroom, a relatively large 2-bedroom, when you can go over to West LA or even other parts of Santa Monica and get a nice little bungalow or a nice, single family, small, but a single family house for the same price, or a duplex or what have you. So, there's cost, there's quality of life, and that's why this whole approach has failed. And one last note, and I'll put this in the chat. I believe it's every 2 years, the Department of Finance does housing and vacancy estimates for every single city in the country. It's this, excuse me, I'm sorry. It's this like 60-page spreadsheet it's a really rich source of information. And what you learn is that, contrary to the YIMBY narrative, the vast majorities of cities in California have pretty healthy vacancy rates. For example, I'm looking at it right now, and as of 2024, the overall residential vacancy rate in San Francisco was 8.7%. And that's smack in the middle of what economists consider to be a healthy vacancy rate. And their multifamily vacancy rate is 11%, which is on the high end. So I will send this document. I think it's a really rich source of information, and it just absolutely debunks this notion that California's housing affordability crisis is a supply crisis. It absolutely is not. And I don't know if anybody's read the recent report from, I think it was the San Francisco Reserve, that laid out the argument that supply has very little to do with cost when it comes to housing, primarily, of course, because housing is not fungible. The YIMBY argument amounts to, if we build 1 million Ferraris, Toyota Corollas will become more affordable. And that's absolutely ridiculous. So thanks, guys.
I
Thank
commend
you. Nothing to add other than I was asked for my email, and I have posted in chat my email and my phone number if any of you want to get in touch with me offline. And Barbara, you're up next.
Thank you. I just wanted to pick up on a comment you made, I think, that had to do with infrastructure and the need to provide it. And I think one of our continuing themes or notions that needs to be said over and over is that when we do this kind of blanket upzoning, we allow developers to become our city's planners. And when they get to pick and choose, or I will use the expression cherry pick lots here and there, it becomes more expensive for cities to deliver services and build out infrastructure. So I think that's something worth mentioning and continuing to mention. And then for future discussion, I'm concerned about the way that YIMBY groups always talk about the fact that they don't think the cities are going to meet their housing element goals. And that's what justifies some of these new measures. And I think the problem for us, or the challenge for us, is to be able to explain that the housing element and its goals were created in an entire vacuum. And that vacuum did not take into account things like fires, things like COVID, shortage of materials. Now we have the immigration scares. We won't have construction workers to rebuild Southern California after the fire, and add on top of that tariffs that will make lumber and steel more expensive and will create horrible problems with slowing down construction and rebuilding efforts. So the housing element is static. The world has moved on, and those goals become all the more unrealistic. And I don't know how, when we're fighting all of these immediate problems, how we still remember that we have to attack the bigger beast, which is corrupt and bankrupt.
Thank you very much. Excellent points, and no need for me to say anything. And Bernie and Lois, you're up. After you've spoken, if you could lower your hands, please.
Okay, I was represented the state of California in the overall planning of Los Angeles a long time ago. The upshot was I've been a target for assassination several times by the electric industry who hired the Irvings to kill me. Just background, if you want to deal with the Sherman Antitrust Act, where you have monopoly capitalizing, controlling the market, we don't enforce it since the Reagan years. Second, HCD, the housing development thing, has not existed since 1999, when only the title but not its application exists. It was abolished. All it does is that you can refer to HCG for information, providing you use monopoly capitalism. Also, the Davis-Sterling Act, in effect, has now been, shall we say, removed into the general market. 25% of co-ops can now be thrown into the market, thanks to our good Governor Newsom, who declared, there you have affordable housing. The last count of affordability in the Bay Area was 80% could not afford housing. And that included a large number that would be considered upper middle class anywhere else in the nation. Also unknown and unstated is, for the very first time, San Jose and San Francisco have lost their market status. they have been downgraded in bonds.
Thank you very much for your comments. Rick, do we have time for one more question before we move on to the next speaker?
Sure.
Okay, and Marcella, you're up.
You're muted.
Sorry, I didn't know when to plug this, but since we've had so many issues, Monday night, Patrick Condon is going to be speaking on a webinar. And so I have it in the very first thing in the chat. So I'm very quick, and if anybody has questions for me, I'll put my email in the chat as well. That's it.
Thank you. Thanks for the time, Rick. Moving on.
Okay. Stu, do you have anything to say about this bill with regard to CEQA or anything else?
Well, the only thing I would say is one of the limitations on CEQA is it only applies where there is a discretionary approval. And to the extent this bill is going to make it mandatory, it's going to make it what they call ministerial to approve these projects where the agency doesn't have any choice, but simply has to check off the box and say, you're done. CEQA can't apply. Now, for some of the other things, CEQA does apply. So, and that's not the only issue, though, because, for example, if you say that turning down one of these projects is presumptively a violation of the Housing Accountability Act, that really puts a great threat on the agency, the public agency, to go ahead and approve the project to avoid being sued and having to pay the other side's attorney's fees. So a lot of cities are going to be very scared about exercising discretion, and it's hard to say you even have discretion when you're threatened with that type of dangerous and damaging lawsuit. So, but nevertheless, the fact that in theory you have discretion means CEQA doesn't means they do have the ability to apply CEQA. But then, after you've done the CEQA analysis, if you're basically had your hands tied in terms of being able to turn it down because it has terrible environmental impacts, CEQA becomes pretty useless. CEQA requires the agency being able to look at the information that's presented and say, no, we can't approve that. So that's my only comments on SB 79.
Thanks. Thanks, Stu. Yeah, let me just recap a couple of things, and I'm going to share again, and we'll do some more talking about 79. You know, we saw the huge amount of coverage that Maria and Jeff's maps showed us, and then you know, got to remember this point of ministerial. Basically, the state, you know, is rezoning, taking over your zoning in, you know, the majority of places, you know, that are anywhere near transit. And not only are they being upzoned, but you also, you know, you're losing your city is losing its powers to do anything about these, you know, ministerial approval, no CEQA. And so the developers just can come in and do what they want, wherever they want. You know, it's a terrible bill. Chris, do you want to chat a little bit about what ONV might be doing here? Hello, Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I stepped away from my computer. Yeah, so I'm sure many of you on this call are familiar with ONV. It's Our Neighborhood Voices, and we are a 501c3 C4 grassroots nonprofit. Unlike the IMBYs, we're an actual grassroots movement. We're not funded by tech billionaires, although we'd love to be. And we do two things. The C3 is an educational and awareness building organization, we work with communities, individuals, local electeds, and other like-minded groups to, basically expand what Livable has been doing for a long time now, and to be an ally to Livable and to Cali and other like-minded groups, another voice out there spreading the word and working with folks at the grassroots level to raise awareness about all of these horrible bills that Sacramento has been shepherding through over the last almost decade now. And then our real crux, our real ultimate goal is a statewide ballot initiative for either the 26 or the 28 ballots that would, by voter initiative, amend the California state constitution to enshrine local authority over zoning, land use, and development, while not touching things like the Coastal Act, CEQA, and some of the good state laws that do exist. We're obviously not 100% anti-Sacramento, we're just 100% anti-YIMBY, and as I like to say, 100% anti-stupid. So the real target there is to get a initiative before the voters, again, hopefully in 26, if not 28, basically one ring to rule them all. It would in one fell swoop crush all of Scott Wiener's dreams and reverse 10 years of harm that the YIMBYs and so many lawmakers have inflicted on our communities. So we need to raise a bunch of money to do that. As you all know, getting a ballot initiative qualified in California is an expensive undertaking, particularly with things like paid signature gatherers. And paid signature gathering is up there with a Post-it on the list of things that I say, why didn't I think of that? Because there are companies that specialize, they charge on a per signature basis for campaigns that want to qualify their initiatives. And while volunteers are fantastic and wonderful, and we appreciate every single second that they give us, the reality is that there's a reason these companies exist, is because they make sure that every I is dotted, every T is crossed, everything is as accurate as humanly possible on every single signature. And the reason for that is, especially for an initiative like this, which is going to go against the establishment and against a lot of very powerful interests, we know that Rob Bonta, or whoever happens to be Secretary of State when the initiative gets on his desk, is going to do everything in their power to find every reason to reject every possible signature they can. So the number that we need is about 850,000. And that means we have to collect about 1.3 million as a buffer to make sure that we qualify. So it is a heavy lift. And the good news is we have just an absolutely fantastic team that we've put together. The boards of both the C3 and the C4 are deeply knowledgeable, deeply experienced. And over the last, basically, I'd say 3 or 4 months, we have started seeing and having communities and local leaders and local electeds reach out to us. And in politics, as many of you well know, as in life, it's always a good sign when your phone starts ringing and you don't have to be the one picking up the phone and dialing for dollars all the time. So we've really started to feel a groundswell of not just support, but real enthusiasm. I think people see, one of the nice things about ONV is it takes about 10 seconds to explain, and people tend to get it right away. And that's another really good thing in politics, when you don't have to explain what the situation is, when everybody knows the situation. And increasingly, the YIMBYs are doing a lot of our work for us because they're so hubristic and they're so arrogant that they think that they can just do anything they want, wherever they want, to whomever they want. And they are getting an object lesson, an increasingly powerful object lesson, that it's one thing when you go after economic issues or social issues, as important as those are. It's something quite different when you go after people's homes. And they have now reached this sort of tipping point where there are enough of these projects either approved or already having broken ground in enough communities and enough cities that it's no longer abstract. 5 years ago, as many of you on this call know, this was a very frustrating conversation to have, because you did have to educate people, because people were like, what are you talking about? Rena, is that an actress? I mean, what is this? And now it's happening in so many places. Unfortunately, as Benjamin Franklin famously observed, human beings don't react until they're choking. And now we've got a lot of communities that are choking and they're looking for solutions. And that's why, you know, these calls, more and more people are joining all the time on Livable and Cali. And we're getting just a groundswell of support for OMV. So I'll put the link in the chat. We need donations. Please spread the word. We got a nice donation yesterday, again, sort of indicating that things are starting to swing in our direction. We got a nice big donation that we're very excited about. But we have a long way to go. We're at the very beginning, and I will put my contact information and the ONV website in the chat. And we are in the process of upgrading our website. It looks a little bit, it's not quite where we want it to be, but it has the information that you need. And you can sign up for our newsletter, which I actually write along with one of my partners. So you get a weekly newsletter that we've actually seen. Normally in a campaign, when you send out an email blast, you're really excited if you get a 8 or 9% open rate. We're closer to 40%, which is unheard of in campaign, almost unheard of in campaigns. So we don't just send out a newsletter to fill up your inbox. We're very mindful and very conscientious about the subject matter because we want it to be useful to you and a quick read and give you something to talk about. Last week's, as a matter of fact, was about SB 79. So please sign up for our newsletter. Please consider a donation. No donation is too big, as we say. And please spread the word. So, and quick shout out to Jeff and Marie Kalban at United Neighbors. They're just a powerhouse down here in Los Angeles. They've done so much impactful work. ONV, we're learning a lot from them. So those are the kinds of allies that are coming increasingly to the fore, and I just can't say enough about the work they've done here in LA. Every Angelino owes them a debt of gratitude. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, let me just relate back now why the SB 79 fight, why OMV is pretty important. I mean, all of our allied groups are important. United Neighbors, Catalyst, Livable, Cali, ONV, and probably some others, smaller groups, but it's really going to be important for all of us to use our reach in a coordinated fashion to kill this thing. And ONV's newsletter just was totally about SB 79. Last week was great. ONV has maybe 50,000 on their mailing list, which is probably more than any of the other groups. So coordinating and using the ONV outreach to help us defeat SB 79 is going to be very important. So that's why I wanted Chris to get everybody introduced to that, so that and signing up for their newsletter is great. And we'll talk about some other things later with regard to actions we can take.
And just sorry, one more quick thing, Rick, and thank you for that. If you have something going on in your community, in your neighborhood, I mean, there's a reason we call ourselves Our Neighborhood Voices. It wasn't just a clever name that we came up with. Send it to us. Excuse me, a little congested today. And we can include it in the newsletter, and we can spread the word. It always helps, as I said earlier, to talk about specific examples. So thanks.
Okay, thank you. Barbara, I see your hands up.
Well, I wanted to thank Chris for his work, but also ask what kind of fundraising goal do we need in order to get ONV on the ballot? And even beyond that, once on the ballot, to defend it against the kinds of voices that will come out against it, the YIMBY Chorus and Wiener and Company. Because I think we need somehow to educate our audiences, our constituents, and our HOA boards and any other organizations that in order to succeed, we have to be giving money to Livable California, to ONV, to sustain the movement's growth.
Short answer, to qualify for the ballot is about a $25 million effort. And then the campaign to persuade voters and inform voters and get people to vote for it will be another 20 to 25 million. So we're talking about 50 million all told.
As they say, we got to put our money where our mouths are.
Yeah, and we're having some meetings with some deep pockets in the coming months. Like I said, we just got a nice donation yesterday. So I and a couple others are leading that charge, and we're out there big game hunting. But small dollar donations are absolutely crucial. You can set up a recurring donation, however you want to do it. And again, without forgetting about Livable and the other allied groups. But we're undertaking a heavy lift here. So that's the magic number.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, Claire.
Hi, thank you for
Wait,
that.
go ahead.
Sorry, I'm on your website that you sent us, the State Department of Finance. You said there was a vacancy rate report. I can't quite find it in this link. What would we look for?
Well, did you download the spreadsheet?
Well, I clicked on your link and then that's all I got. I couldn't find the spreadsheet. Maybe you could put it one more time in the chat.
It automatically downloads. So go to your download file, and it should probably. It's actually not a website. I thought I put that in the chat. It just automatically downloads an Excel file to your computer. The website doesn't actually have any content. It's just a link to the document itself.
Chris,
Okay.
I had the same problem. I got a page not found.
Yeah.
And
Sorry.
Oh, you got a page not found? Okay,
Yeah.
let me go back and try the link again. I might have just.
Thank you.
Yep. Thanks for the heads up.
Melissa.
Yes, thank you. I'm involved in the Democratic Party as a delegate at the state level and a county level, as well as I'm the vice president of my local Democratic club. And what we do a lot of is talk about bills and write resolutions and try to get others to, sign on, and then of course bring it to legislators, or at least put our name as endorsers. So I was wondering, and so I'd like to do something like that, starting at the most local level of the Alhambra Democratic Club. I brought it up to the club a couple days ago, and they're interested, and we'd love it. I would just like to see if any one of your groups could come, or maybe even on Zoom, talk to the group, and then I could propose, why don't we endorse this? And then I could take it to the state, to the county level, and try to get that for all of the Democrats in LA County, the delegates to endorse, or at least start having this conversation, because it's not in their visual line. I don't think they're thinking of these things. So I'd like for that to happen. So is that something that Livable California or ONB can do?
We have, if you go to our website, which I'll put in the chat, there's a tab called resources, and there's a little drop down menu, and you'll see a link to a model resolution.
Okay.
And it's a 2-page resolution. It's exactly what you're asking for.
Okay.
You can tailor it to either your local city council or your Democratic club, or your central committee, whatever the case may be. But yes, we have that resource for you.
And this is for the latest Wiener bills, right?
This is for ONV in general, for local authority in general. But it's the language. You can tailor it to a bill. You can tailor it to ONV. You can tailor it to basically whatever you want to be specific. But it's got the model language, so it just gives you a head start.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And regarding the Wiener bills, at least SB 79, if Maria, maybe you can put your email in the chat. Maria is probably the best positioned right now to provide you a little bit of information that you might use in you're trying to do what you're trying to do.
Great. Thanks.
Okay, I don't see any other hands right this second, so I'm gonna go back to screen sharing. So all my brains are here in my outline here. So we pretty much talked about and clarified what SB 79 does. We've heard from the Kalbans and others. Now I just want to engage us, and I wrote down some thoughts on the effects of SB 79, and actually a lot more came up in this discussion that I can sort of add to these thoughts. And ask for any input to add to these thoughts, because we should build an outline that is our best arguments against SB 79, so that we can all use pick and choose and use the arguments we want, we relate to most in our opposition letters. And we'll talk a little bit later on what we should be doing together to oppose. But so basically my thoughts were that upzoning doesn't increase housing supply or affordability. It raises land values and makes housing more expensive. Transit's an unstable basis for building 50-year plus structures. And transit's mostly relied on by lower income families. And so building what's going to primarily be market rate units along transit and the increasing of land values and the market rate units, it's going to displace and gentrify and displace the people that need transit most, which is the lower income families. And then I've added that it's a major usurping of the authority of local jurisdictions. It's the local control issue. As you can see, city just loses their zoning and planning rights to, hands it over to through the state to the developers. So I'll invite anybody that wants to chime in right now on if you want to add to this effects list while we're here, we can do that, because part of this conversation is to get your input.
I might just add that wherever you're getting the data for the claim, that if there's links to, reputable studies, those links would be with each one of those topics. So when we share it, it can be vetted on their own. Don't take our word for it, kind of thing. Thank you.
Okay. Maria, you got your hand up. Let's see.
Yeah, I was just curious if you could put where this is located. Is it possible to now access this document you're working on online? And when you get it to the point where we can, would you put something in the chat or something so we'll know where to find it? Thanks.
Yeah, at this point, I think shortly after this meeting, we're going to be doing our at least Livable's opposition letter to send through the portal. And, we'll include everything in that. And all of our portal letters are shared on the website. Okay.
To what committees, Rick? Has it been assigned yet?
Yeah, I don't remember.
It's housing and local government.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But if you send it through the portal, which is the most important place to send it, it'll get to the right committees.
Also, Rick, the bullet points are nice. They're easier for us to deal with times than the letter. So if you could include the bullet points as well, that would help us with speaking issues locally. So that's why this particular document would be helpful to have along with, the letter that you're going to write. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Barbara.
Building on your point about gentrification and displacement, you focus on lower income families that are harmed, but it also needs to be drawn to the fact that this is removing the people who use transit and therefore taking away ridership. And this is something I think even Denny Zane acknowledged in one of his Move LA programs, that one of the reasons for declining ridership could be linked to the fact that when the lower income housing near transit is removed, they're losing the riders that used to access transit readily.
Great point. And if you can provide a link to Denny Zane stuff that we can use to educate people, that would be good. But I totally agree. And let me just also expand on the transit organizations themselves, because every city's got a transit organization, and most of them right now are in big budget deficit, and they're going to look at they're going to look at this and go, oh great, we're adding, if we add all this housing, we're going to be adding more riders, just the opposite of what you said. And so I think we have to watch out for and educate, if we can, the transit organizations to basically let them know this isn't a good thing for you. Chris, I think you're up.
I just wanted to add another thought when it comes to transit and the removal of parking minimums. When you think about it, it's actually inherently discriminatory, right? Because if I'm sitting on a bus or a train or any white collar professional, I can make money during my commute. I can be working on my computer. I can be taking a phone call, what have you. Where are we supposed to put the plumbers and the electricians and the landscapers and the art and the yard workers and all of those people who cannot exactly haul all their equipment and materials on a big blue bus? So you're actually building housing. They call it abundant housing. It's the opposite. The YIMBYs are the ultimate NIMBYs because they only want one kind of housing to the exclusion of all others, including that which is needed by blue collar working folks, which is a majority of California. And by removing parking, you are also discriminating against people with disabilities and the elderly who may not be able to walk 1 mile round trip every time they need to go to the grocery store or every time they need to get their hair cut or what have you. So the entire YIMBY approach is biased against everybody but able-bodied white collar professionals who can afford to live in those places and can afford that kind of a lifestyle. So it's really some of the most exclusionary housing when you really think about it, because there's a very small subset of the population that are ever going to be able to live in those places and make a living and raise a family. So that's my thought.
Okay, Chris, you're up.
Hi, I attended the ONV meeting on Wednesday, and Anita was going over SB 79 as well. And I took some notes and I just wanted to bring it up, a couple of points that we hadn't discussed here. It seems to be an amendment to another bill, but one area was at 5912.161, where it says charter cities can't exempt themselves under this section 4, no reimbursements required. And they did not talk about high fire severity zones, and I know that map is coming out for Southern California on Monday. So I just wanted to bring up those points as well, that you can find the bill and you can look at all the red crossouts and actually read what it's saying. It's horrible. That's all I have to say.
Okay, thanks. John,
Yeah, the biggie is that new construction costs more than saving existing houses. And Mayor of Solana Beach, Lisa Hebner, is a good friend and adjoining city, uh, says that her city has lost affordable housing under SB 9 because of the gentrification effect, because the new construction's expensive and has to pencil out. So she's seeing that happen. And that's the other argument to use. It's accelerating gentrification, but even if it weren't fancy stuff being built, it's still expensive to do new construction.
yeah. Some people have left their hands up after talking, and I've lost track here. I think Claire is probably next.
Hi, just two questions. Chris, could you possibly put in the chat that link to the Excel spreadsheet? I keep looking and I'm just hoping it gets in there. And then also, John, is there any way in the world you can talk Lisa Hebner into going to Gavin Newsom's office and speaking to him directly about this? It's really getting unfair that direct lines to people who are making decisions are getting cut. And I feel like she's so eloquent. I posted in the chat her video from HCD, that Sandag from last year in March. Is there any way you could talk her into putting a coalition together and going and speaking directly to the governor? Those are my two questions.
Well, we can try. The other good news is that our Sandag representative from Encinitas now is very much aligned with us. So we're turning Sandag a bit too. So I'll post a seed with him as well as with Lisa and see what we can do.
And perhaps find some people at ABAG. If Sandag and ABAG joined forces and went together and spoke directly with the governor with one fell swoop of a pen, he could pretty much reduce those numbers. It's really ridiculous how, based on, the population projections, HCD is not readjusting the 6th cycle of renal numbers. This is really in his hands now because Scott Wiener's out of control. Yeah. So, if you
I'm
want,
not sure
contact.
we ever get ABAG to take that kind of a position.
We got to try.
I think they're
long gone.
Lost cause.
Isn't there a third Association of Bay Area Governments? Just curious. I know there's Sandag, ABAG. Is there a third?
There are all kinds of them.
Well, can we get a couple? Does anyone have any links to the other ones, perhaps, to form a coalition with Sandag?
They're up here is SACOG.
How do you feel about connecting them with the group at Sandag? Is that something in your wheelhouse?
There's the regional one, but I'm sure Tom Rubin knows about that.
There is an organization that sees things very much our way of local electeds, and that's CALE. They have meetings most Sundays. They don't have one this time. I will post a link to CALE. And again, these are local electeds who are generally very, very dissatisfied with what the state is doing and what MTC ABAG is doing. And MTC ABAG is one word because they have all the same staff and the same executive director. The membership is a little bit different, but for all practical purposes, except a few remaining legal requirements that they cannot totally consolidate, it is one organization.
And two of the founding members of Cali are on this call. Rick, David Modi has had his hand up for quite some time.
Okay, thank you. David, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So if we're talking about amendments, if we can't kill, one might be to limit the effects of SB 79's bus routes only to that part of the route where the dedicated bus line exists and not the entire route, just as one of those fallback positions.
Gotcha. Yeah. Basically, these amendments, any amendments we come up with, are sort of, poison pills to make it much less onerous than it already is.
Yeah, and I think that would really cut back the scope of it.
Yeah. Although my suggestion was, use the argument that bus lines are transitory.
I would definitely support that over my suggestion.
And just limit the damn bill to rail.
Yeah, definitely go for what your suggestion first, but if you can't get that, try mine.
Okay, thank you.
Too easy to put up a sign and say it's a bus lane.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Another thing, using the argument of the affordability and the reliance of lower income people on transit, we could ask that some percentage, and I'm talking about a big percentage, like 30-40% of all SB 79 projects are required to be affordable. If you're gonna call this put this where the affordable people need it to be, then make it affordable. Because so that's another suggestion. And then with regard to what we talked about earlier, the amount of costs it'll put on the cities with these kinds of things, basically, if you're gonna force the cities to upzone to accommodate these projects, then the bill should allow cities to do full nexus studies and require full impact fees on all SB 79 projects. Just make them pay their way if instead of giving it all away. All right, let's go on to actions we can take. We can mobilize city planning departments. I've already mentioned this, to do impact studies and maps like Maria and Jeff showed us. And Maria and Jeff, while we're thinking about that, let me ask you to send your PowerPoint, and I'll put it on the website to make available to people so that when they're trying to mobilize their city planning departments, they can show the impacts you guys have found. And
Sure. No problem.
Okay.
Rick, do you want PowerPoint or PDF?
Probably PowerPoint.
Got it.
Okay. And then get your supervisors or city councils to have as many cities as possible formally oppose. Jeff and Maria and Jeff have started that effort in Los Angeles. Right. I know there's some people that have started that effort for San Francisco. I invited the members of California Alliance of Local Electeds, who are all city officials, to attend this call if they could. But each of you know where you live, your supervisors, etc., and we needed an effort to have cities formally oppose this. And then we need as many individuals and groups to oppose through the legislative portal and in contacting their own legislators. And then, finally, at some point, we need to coordinate actions among all major groups. Part of this call has been to, bring our folks together with United Neighbors and ONV and such. And Catalyst. I saw Susan is on here. So we need to keep coordinating the actions among the major groups And we're talking about at some point having a coordinated statewide town hall against SB 79. That'll be down the road a bit. Chris.
Sorry, really quickly. I converted the vacancy document to a Google Sheet, which is Google's version of Excel, and it's a shared link. So it should work now. And I just put that in the chat. And then just a quick response in terms of how to reach your whether it's ABAG or SCAG or what have you. The boards of those entities are, I don't know the exact breakdown, but they are comprised of local electeds. So it's very possible that somebody on your city council or your mayor is a member of that board. So you may want to go, figure out what your cog is and go to their website and look at their board. And there's a good chance that somebody in your community, in your city or a nearby city is on the board. And that's the most direct way to reach out to those entities. And just a quick comment in terms of reaching out to Newsom directly. I don't know if anyone saw the story in it was widely circulated last week that it turns out that Newsom has been providing burner phones with his number, his personal cell phone number programmed in. He's been sending them to this top tech CEOs by the dozens. So you and I can't talk to Gav, but if you're Mark Zuckerberg, you now have an untraceable burner phone being paid for by his administration, so you can call him up anytime you want to talk about this stuff. Just thought you'd be interested in knowing that.
Maybe we can borrow one of those phones.
Send him your own phone.
Okay. We have more hands up, but I want to move on shortly to SB 607. But Tom, go ahead.
Yes, if you want to contact the MTC commissioners, go ahead. There's 16 voting members, including at least one from each county. But frankly, MTC and therefore ABAG are totally dominated by the staffs and the commission members, even people like the mayor of San Jose or the mayor of San Francisco, just do not have the time to go through a package that can be this thick for their monthly meetings. So good luck. You may as well do it. You can say that you tried, but don't expect to have much in the way of success. The attitude there is very much you got to go along to get along. So if you want the commissioners to vote for my funding for my city or county, you've got to vote for the funding and the programs for everybody else. I have been trying to deal with MTC for over half a decade. I cannot tell you how many times I have been very disappointed. Now, a few times I have been happy with the outcome.
Thanks, Claire.
Sorry, last question. Chris, I like to send things like this with citations. Is it possible? Can you put your email in the chat?
Sure. What do you mean by citations? I didn't quite catch that.
Well, this is now a Google Doc, but I'm curious where it came from exactly and how if I want to send it to an elected official, I like to have a citation with it.
Yeah, it's unfortunately DOF that's why everybody got to the page that said page not found. I'll see if I can find it on the way back machine. But the source is the Department of Finance, the California State Department of Finance.
Okay.
But I'll see if I can find the site. I don't know why they took it down. Maybe they moved it somewhere. But I got this as an attachment from a city council member down here in Santa Monica. So I'll see if I can dig up the original site for you.
Okay, great. Because I'd love to have the Excel version too. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Bernie.
Bernie, you got to unmute yourself.
There he is.
Hello. Thank you for a very wise comment. Thank you very much. However, to make anything happen, you have to specify what good planning really is, as it used to be when there was a general plan code. In fact, say you analyze what is needed, and then you mandate simply doing the job. Unless you tell local cities and counties what to do and what is planning, then you get nothing. And that was the general plan code as it existed before 1999. In effect, telling mayors or whatever, go do something without specifying what is necessary and what is professional. You get nothing. So there needs to be put into Mr. Newsom's core, in effect, statewide, the general plan code as it existed. This is what good planning, and if you don't do it, you don't get the money. Thank you.
Thanks, Bernie. Okay. Can we move on to SB 607? And Stu, are you ready to take over?
Yeah, I can do it. I'll try and make this very brief. We've gone on a long time, so I know people want to get off and do other things today. So I'm going to make this a very brief presentation. I'm going to put up the letter that we are sending to the legislature concerning SB 607. I think it's much better to use that than to try and let me see. Hold on now. I'm not sure I see where I can do this anymore. They've changed the way they have this. Oh, here we go. Yeah. Here we go. So here's the letter that we are going to be sending to the legislature. And I'm also going to put in the chat a link where you can find that letter. Let's see. Here we go. I put it up on on Dropbox, so you can download that, and if you want to use that as a template for your own letter. So this bill is a different aspect of planning. This has to do with CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act, which most environmentalists feel is one of the most important pieces of legislation that California has ever enacted. And it's even more important now because the Trump administration is essentially defanging the federal equivalent, National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, so that it will be unusable. And so if anyone wants to have any environmental review something in California, it's going to have to be by CEQA, not by NEPA. Even if it's a federally funded project, the NEPA guidelines are being wiped clean so that there won't be anything to use in terms of using NEPA. What this is doing is it would do the same thing to CEQA, only in a different way. It's got three parts to it, and I'm going to go through the three parts in sequence. The first part is not that big a deal. It creates a new section, a statutory section under CEQA, and that section would exempt from CEQA any zoning change that is consistent with the jurisdiction's housing element. And the only exceptions to that, if the new zoning would allow construction of a distribution center or a gas infrastructure, oil and gas infrastructure, then it would still have to do CEQA review. But for example, a lot of other types of rezonings to commercial or even light industrial would not require CEQA review to make those sort of changes. And the idea here is that, oh, well, we're interested in making sure everything works in terms of housing. But of course, there's far more things that can happen environmentally than things having to do with housing. And the housing element is basically about housing. It doesn't concern itself with, for example, public safety, open space, emergency access, toxic materials, or any other issue that might affect the environment. If it's not really having to do with housing, it's not going to be in the housing element. So saying something has to be consistent with the housing element is saying very little as far as environmental impact. So essentially, that's what this first part of the bill is. It wipes clean in terms of secret review, large types, a large number of rezonings, and those would get no more environmental review at all. Section 2 is even worse. Section 2 is a section sequence near the beginning. It's section 21080.1, and it defines the scope of environmental review under CEQA. That is to say, what are you going to look at on what sort of projects? But equally important is what's called a standard of review. And that's basically saying this is how deeply you have to look. This is how carefully you have to look at what you're looking at. And it also governs if a court is challenging, if there's a court challenge to a review under CEQA, then the court has to ask, well, what standard of review should we use to evaluate the adequacy of this CEQA analysis? And it adds 2 subparagraphs, and subparagraph 3 is the key one, which would redefine the standard review for a negative declaration or a mitigated negative declaration. Now, when you're doing CEQA, there are several levels of review. First off, the first thing is CEQA doesn't even apply if there's no discretion. As we've talked about, anything that is called ministerial, where you just check the boxes, doesn't require CEQA review, because the idea is if the agency is just checking boxes, it's not really having any ability to make a decision that means something about it. All it's doing is saying, does it do this? Does it do that? Yes, no, okay, it's done. What you're really more concerned about is if you're asking, well, exactly what is this project going to do and what types of impacts could that have? And consequently, should we approve this project or not? That's discretion. You have the ability to say, no, we're not going to approve this. So CEQA only applies if you have that discretion. And of course, what a lot of these bills are about is eliminating that discretion or explicitly saying CEQA doesn't apply here. But once you're doing that, you have to decide how likely is this to cause any environmental impact. If you can say, no, this is not likely to cause any impact at all, you can do what's called a negative declaration, which is say this isn't going to cause any impacts. Or you can do a mitigated negative declaration, which says, well, this in theory could cause impacts, but we're going to put in requirements that will make that impact not significant. So it might be, for example, you're doing something that affects air quality and you say, okay, we're going to require filtration on this project that will eliminate all the potentially damaging or harmful or unhealthy air products that could come out of this. And now you say, well, we've eliminated all the things that could cause an air quality impact, so therefore we don't have to worry about air quality impacts. And when you can do that for all of the potential impacts, you can do what's called a mitigated negative declaration. In either of those cases, however, you never go into detail in asking what sort of things could this project do. You are basically either not dealing with them at all, saying this won't have an impact, or you're saying, well, there's 2 or 3 things that might have an impact, and we're going to put in a specific measure that will eliminate that particular problem. What this new subparagraph would do is say that if you're doing a negative declaration or a negative declaration, the standard review is all the agency has to have is some substantial evidence supporting approval of the negative declaration or mitigating negative declaration. They don't have to do any study at all. They just have to have some evidence in hand. They say, well, we've got a chart here that shows that there's not any major air quality impacts in this area, and therefore we don't have to worry about air quality impacts. If you have a chart and it's coming from a reputable source, that's considered substantial evidence. If you got that one piece of substantial evidence, that's all you need to approve the negative declaration. Needless to say, that's very different from an environmental impact report. An environmental impact report, you've already done a detailed examination of the situations, of things that might possibly affect the environment, and you've gone through and concluded as a result of intensive study, this won't have an effect, or here are the effects it will have, and this is what we can do to mitigate them. But what this subparagraph would do, it would make the standard review for a negative declaration or a mitigated negative declaration the same as for an EIR. And in that case, why would anyone ever do an EIR? Because if they can do a mitigated negative declaration or a negative declaration and have those approved on the same basis as an EIR would, you would never do an EIR. So that's a really dangerous, essentially would make the whole idea of an EIR superfluous. Finally, Section 3 of the bill says the Office of Land Use and Climate Innovation, that used to be the Office of Planning and Research, gets to redefine urban infill categorical exemption, needs to look around and say any area, regardless of the presence of existing urban uses, whose zoning is consistent with infill development, should be subject to that exemption. Well, of course, infill development includes things that are, for example, you have a whole area that's 3 blocks of housing and there's an empty lot. Well, that empty lot is in the middle of three blocks of housing. So therefore, anything you put there that's going to be housing is going to be infill. And you can do the same with other types of development, saying this area is surrounded by the same type of development, and therefore we can rezone that in a way that allows that same development, and that's going to be infill. But what this says is this could include, you could do infill, and the main reason for the infill housing infill exemption, CEQA exemption, is for housing, saying if you do housing that is smaller than a certain size and is located in an area that's already developed, it's not likely to have any major impacts, and therefore we're going to exempt it from CEQA. Well, now this says you can not only do housing, but most other commercial and industrial uses. As long as the zoning would allow infill uses, anything else goes. For example, and the only exception that this bill makes in that is it says you can't exempt it from CEQA if it's going to have a distribution center or oil and gas infrastructure. Well, needless to say, those are not the only things that can have significant impacts. You could build a chemical plant under this and it'd be CEQA exempt. You could build a private sewage storage site and have that be CEQA exempt. You could build a toxic waste storage and treatment facility, and all of those would be exempt from review, CEQA review under this section. So what you can see here is that this is just going to essentially totally emasculate CEQA, make CEQA into a worthless, empty shell. And we end up by saying this committee the Committee on Environmental Quality needs to reject this bill in its current form and return it to its author for a total rewrite and rethinking. Now, at the end, we say, well, we think Senator Wiener is capable of writing a far better bill than the current bill might indicate. We would be happy to work with Senator Wiener to revise his bill and allow us to withdraw our opposition. Now, why are we doing that? Why are we saying, well, we'd like to help you change the bill? We don't expect that Senator Wiener is going to be at all interested in changing this bill in ways that would not impact CEQA the way this does. That we think that's the whole purpose of the bill, is to destroy CEQA. But the legislature likes to hear people who saying, well, we're willing to work with you. We're willing to come up with ways of amending this bill so that it might work better and might be more workable than what you've put forward. So we put that in there at the end as sort of a sop to the legislators who might say, oh, well, you're just being obnoxious. You just want to shut this bill down. Why don't you be reasonable? So we're saying we're willing to be reasonable as long as Senator Wiener is. So that's the essence of this bill. We think it's the worst bill that we've seen in terms of CEQA and environmental change. in the time since Livable, California has been in existence. And there are lots, I think probably pretty much every environmental group in the state is going to be opposing this bill. But there are lots of other groups like industrial groups, chemical manufacturing companies, a lot of chambers of commerce that are going to say, this is wonderful, we should go ahead with this. So we can expect there's going to be a lot of money groups with lots of money and political influence that'll be pushing the other side. We're hoping that we can get enough people on this side to basically get the committee to reject the bill. That's essentially what I can say.
Thank you, Stu. Yeah, I think we can safely say that between these two bills, Wiener's done what he wants to do, and that is, nearly wipe out CEQA. And of course, Livable California is very concerned with the environment, and CEQA provides a lot of good information for decision makers and even the developers themselves. So, we'd love to see you guys do a portal letter, take a position against this, because we think it's one of the like we said at the start, one of the two worst bills of the year. Let's see who's up here. Maureen.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for this, Mr. Flashman. But my question, I just want to clarify. Are you saying some of the mitigations that they're coming up with really have no proper scientific studies to back them up? Like they're just
Scientific study
fantasy?
to back anything they say up.
Well, the standard for a negative declaration is you have to basically say, we have a problem here. And the standard right now is if you can produce a fair evidence that shows a fair argument that there will be an impact, you can't, the negative declaration cannot stand. This flips that on its head and says, as long as the agency has some evidence saying it will be okay, that's all you need.
Wow, thank you.
It's probably one of the most damaging proposed changes to CEQA in the whole time since CEQA was created.
Hey Rick, just real quick, there's a message in the chat that says recording is going to stop in 2 minutes. I don't know if that's a mistake, but I just wanted to flag that for you.
Thank you. Shouldn't, but anyway. Well, maybe that's because we're hitting the time that this thing we're supposed to be done. Barbara, you got something?
Quick comment. We know what CEQA is and we know the good that it has done. It's alphabet soup to most Californians. So I think we need to come up with the best examples of what CEQA has accomplished for communities in order to raise the level of concern that we need to kill it.
There is a whole book that the Planning and Conservation League put out several years back about CEQA that goes through the various places where CEQA has changed things for the better. And I'll look up the title for the book, and maybe we can put it on the website. But it has been around for 50 years, and it's done huge amounts to prevent damaging projects from going forward, and have good projects done better. One of the most major things that it did was there were major challenges to what used to be called was the twin tunnels. This idea for expanding the Central Valley project, the state water project, so that it would funnel all of the water in the state through the state water project, and it was just going to be a horrendous impact on the delta and the bay. And that CEQA helped kill that project.
Okay, we want to wrap up here pretty soon, so let's try to make the next ones quick. Bernie?
Again, thank you for a very commendable and thoughtful proposal. very much so, using SQL as a base. I do recommend removal for any reference to a general plan code, which has not existed since 1999, unless you technically specify what that general plan code in effect must do. You've got something that is a problem. Specifically, in effect, if we use LAFCO, Local Agency Formation Code, and there is no direction as to what planning really is, technically, we are simply throwing in a problem. If you understand what I'm saying.
Bernie, you're right that one of the whole ideas of general plans was to put some guidelines as to how local communities should plan themselves. And it very much ties in with local control. And what the legislature is doing now is making the general plan into a footnote. And in CEQA, general plans are also important in terms of CEQA, in that one of the ways that something can have a significant impact is if it results in the general plan being changed in a way that will cause environmental damage. So, for example, if a general plan was revised to allow toxic waste to be placed on any place in the city, that would certainly have a tremendous impact. And that's the sort of thing that you could say that change in the general plan is a violation of CEQA.
Let me recommend that the general plan as it now exists says you shall refer to the free market as a means of dealing with your redress and approach HCD what they otherwise would recommend, with no specification what planning really should consist of. In effect, they can do any goddamn thing they want.
Yeah. Well, you can see in this bill, one of the things it's doing is it's saying, well, you have to pay attention to the housing element, but nothing else. And that's something that the general plan is not supposed to allow. It's not supposed to give one element preeminence over the other elements. But again, the legislature is mucking around with general plan law as well as with CEQA, and it's just making all of it nonsensical.
Simply said, remove reference to the general
He's
plan.
agreeing with you.
Okay, thank you. Melissa, you're up.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So maybe one bit that's very easy and tangible for the general public, like myself, to understand and grasp about CEQA without going into the weeds isn't it very expensive for developers? Is it not to developers who need to do a whole CEQA report? And isn't that very expensive for them to do? Maybe I'm wrong, but maybe
It
that's
can
something.
be. It depends on how big the development and how many potential impacts there are. A
Mhm.
lot of, for example, at this point, with the various exemptions that have been made for doing housing projects under CEQA, most housing projects now don't have to do very much, if anything, in terms of CEQA. But nevertheless, the developers want to have a total exemption from CEQA, so that you could build. For example, there was a project that was being proposed in the area just north of LA, right where the Grapevine goes. They were proposing essentially a new city, and they wanted to get it exempted from CEQA, and they didn't get it. And when they looked at all of the impacts that huge development would have, it had a lot.
Well, my point being that if this is maybe something that the general public could grasp, is that if this bill passes, it'll exempt developers from having to pay millions of dollars to have a CEQA report. So maybe
Well, but that is the whole purpose, is because essentially what Wiener is saying is that complying with CEQA is extremely expensive, and therefore we can't afford it.
I see. Mhm. Thank you.
You, Tom.
Thank you. Speaking as somebody who has been on both sides of CEQA for decades, first, I think it is a very strong protection and should be retained. However, in fairness, CEQA is frequently misused. And before anyone gets into a debate or makes a presentation or writes an article, I have posted a recent document from Cato in chat that talks about some of the things that have, in my opinion, been done improperly to use CEQA to hold up projects. For example, it is not at all uncommon for labor unions to file a CEQA complaint and therefore force the project sponsors to give various labor concessions, such as a project stabilization agreement. There was a CEQA complaint against Valley Link that was filed by a real estate developer to ensure that their project would be served by Valley Link and get a station. And this type of thing goes on all the time. And many people, including those who are looking out for the environment and are looking out for the good of the people, find these very objectionable. So take a look at that Cato article before you get in discussions with people, because there are legitimate complaints about CEQA. And believe
And
it or not, it
there's
was
been a lot of
Ronald Reagan
there's been a
who
lot of
originally got it
legislation.
passed.
There's been a lot of legislation in the last 5 years to basically try and get rid of those types of lawsuits. The problem is it's really hard to distinguish when something is done because you're concerned about the environment and when something's being done for some very narrow purpose. And while some of the things
I agree with you totally on that. And I believe we must fail on the side of preserving the rights of the people.
Yeah.
Even though it's expensive and can take a long time, I think we have to err on that side. And that I apply the same standard to some things that are going on nationally, but enough about that.
Yeah, let me say one other thing in terms of, it is true that sometimes labor unions will file CEQA opposition because they want to get a project labor agreement. And then when and if they get their project labor agreement, they drop their opposition to the project. But sometimes those letters do contain significant information about environmental impacts, and somebody who doesn't have the resources that the labor unions have and wouldn't be able to do the studies that they've done could then use that to challenge the project on legitimate environmental grounds.
Okay, thanks. I've shared the screen again, a couple of things as we close here. One is I've put this document in chat. You can download it, but it's kind of the links that might be important to you based on this conversation. But the Livable California website, as we write these letters, and there's only 2 in here right now, but all of our portal letters, as we write them, are made available to you guys at the second link. You can see all the bills we're tracking at the third link, and the bills scheduled for hearing at this link. And then I've put in links to both SB 79 and SB 607. The links I put in there take you to today's law as amended, and I found that's the best way to see what the bill really is doing, especially on SB 79. And then lastly is the California's legislative letter portal. This is where you want to this link. This is where you want to send your opposition letters. And if anybody hasn't used it and has issues with trying to figure it out or what it does or how to do it, you can email me and I'll be happy to help you with that. Speaking of emailing me, my email address is also in the chat. It's just rick@livableca.org. And I did notice that we had a lot of people register and join this teleconference late, meaning, after the Kalbans had spoken, and their information was very, very important. So you can anybody that missed that, you can email me at rick@livableca.org, and I'll send you a link to the video so you can watch what the Kalbans presented. Anything else before we go?
Can you put this link at the bottom of the chat, because I can't find it in the long list of chats.
Sure.
Great meeting, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Rick, real quick. I have not admittedly been on the Livable website in a minute. Is there a link or a way that folks can contact their legislators, their assembly members, and their senators? Is there a way to do that?
Not directly. There's
Each of the websites for the state legislature, the Senate and the Assembly does have a place where you can find how to contact any of the senators or assembly members. And I suppose we could put a link to that. We could put a link to those two parts of the state legislature website on our website.
I think that would be great. And the reason I bring it up is we're talking about with SB 79 and a couple of the other really bad bills, that as they work their way through committee and through the process, as it starts to heat up as we get into the late spring, early summer, that we will create a schedule so that people can email their lawmakers or call their lawmakers. It takes literally 30 seconds to a minute at really key times. So when it's about to go before such and such committee and go up for a vote, you flood the zone with calls and emails. And as Rick can attest, that worked in the past with SB 50. I think we could rebuild that engine. So some of the groups we're talking about, ONG and Neighbors United Neighbors, Livable, and Cali are talking about coordinating that effort. So I just want to kind of fire that shot across everybody's bow to be thinking about that and looking for that, because it really is amazing. It may sound a little Pollyannish, but when these legislators start getting dozens or hundreds of calls and emails from their constituents, they go, holy cow, I better pay attention to this, because people seem awfully ticked off about this. So just kind of previewing that coming up over the next couple months. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. All right, everybody, we're a little bit over on time, so we should say goodbye. Don't forget to contribute. You can do that on our website. But take care, everybody, and thanks for your participation and your thoughts today. And let's kill these two bills.